Welcome to Pro Audio Profiles. I'm Brennan Decora, and on this show, we focus on techniques for inspired studio performances. Each week, I host experts from across the industry. Let's get started. Today, we have Dennis Sands. He's a scoring engineer and mixer that has credits on all 4 Avengers movies, Forrest Gump, all 3 Back to the Future movies, Shawshank Redemption, the first 2 Spider-Man movies, and many, many more. Enjoy. Well, I want to thank you for being here, first and foremost. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Really.
Awesome. I'd like to start out by kind of going over your backstory. If you want to share kind of how you got your start, what led you to this point, that kind of thing. And feel free to take some time on it if you want.
Okay, well, like anybody who's, had any level of success in anything, there's an element of luck. And I was, honestly, very fortunate. I had a friend who, let me back up. I love recording. Mm-hmm. My father gave me a tape recorder when I was 10, I think.
Okay.
And
nice.
It was a Woolen Sack. I remember even the name. And I just messed with that. I love that thing. And I just did tons of everything. Make my own programming and
right. Nice.
Just everything,
Nice. Yeah.
Being a kid, had no idea what the hell I was doing. Nonetheless, I just loved it.
That's what it's about.
And however, I studied, eventually in college. I was pre-med, and I had visions of being a doctor. Mm-hmm. But once I sort of made my way through all the required courses, at the end of it, I realized it's not my life. It's not for me. But the recording thing and music thing was always very strong. And one day I got a call after I graduated from a friend of my brother's who worked for MGM Records at the time.
Okay.
And a guy named Eric Miller, who's recently, or not, a few years ago, passed away, unfortunately. Okay. But very, very good friends. And he said, well, listen, he said, we have a recording studio. Mm-hmm. So MGM Records had a studio on, Fairfax in L.A. Okay. They actually had 3 studios, 2 mastering rooms, and a tape production room.
Okay.
And he said, well, we have a huge tape library, and they need somebody to sort of help administer it,
right.
Log in the tapes and, basically a low-level starting job.
Right.
But it's in the studio.
Yeah.
And I might add at the time it was always very, very challenging to get a job in a studio.
Right.
And I had tried. I had applied to, I think, every potential studio in LA, and there was probably several hundred at the time, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Varying levels,
of course.
Now, this is 1970, maybe, 71. And everybody said no, of course. Right. But they were very kind. It was not, it wasn't hey, kid, get the hell out of here. It was, okay, what's your background? Don't have any.
Yeah.
But, I left an application and I went around again and called and, didn't. Well, all of a sudden, here's this opportunity to actually get into a studio. Mm-hmm. And so he calls me at, 10 o'clock in the morning, and I'm down at the studio by 11. I was like, yes. I don't, I'll never forget. I made $125 a week.
Okay.
And I didn't care.
Yeah.
I mean,
was it just administrative stuff, or were you actually using the gear at all?
The job initially was, well, let me explain. They had 70,000 tapes in their tape library.
Jeez.
It was located, obviously, off-site in a a building in Hollywood, on Hollywood Boulevard and Ivar, actually.
Okay.
And the job entailed, first of all, any new tapes that were generated. So any work, any recording that was done in the studios themselves, it had to be logged in and put on the shelves,
Right.
and documented. But also, as part of the normal routine for MGM Records at that time, they would re-release albums periodically.
Right.
So, MGM musicals, for example. They had, the Osmonds were on their label at that time. So there would be, Osmond masters that would pull and they'd re-release those things. They owned Verve Records.
Okay.
So their entire library, they'd pull records, huge jazz label. Mother's Invention, Kama Sutra, they own that label as well. So, just various, labels, various albums or singles would be re-released periodically. Well, I had to go to, to Hollywood, pull the tapes, find them, pull the tapes, bring them back. So I was doing that, and there were great, wonderful engineers there. Very classically trained engineer. When I say I'm not talking about classical music. I'm talking about engineers in studios that were, record studios, where they had a lot of sort of great, training. They were real engineers. They understood.
Right. The ones that wore lab coats.
More or less, yeah. So, but really great mixers.
Right.
And they really didn't want to do tape copies.
Of course.
So, but that was part of the thing, because let's say they decide to release a jazz, one of the jazz albums. Well, I'd pull the master. They'd have to make a master tape copy of that to send, let's say, to Canada, where they would do their own mastering and pressing.
Of course.
Or Japan or Europe or whatever. Well, these mixers who are, phenomenal, they want to do a tape copy.
Yeah.
So I'm this kid. I said, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Teach me how to do. I didn't know how to. Okay. Well, here's how you align the machine. Here's the tones, the thing. Bang! I'm 3 months.
Nice.
Now I'm doing master tape copies.
Okay.
There were also 2 mastering rooms there.
Okay.
They weren't the great mastering modern, but they were we still did a lot of mastering there. Same deal, the guys just didn't want to. I'll do it. Teach me. Now, 6 months after I started, now I'm learning how to do mastering.
Okay.
And in the meanwhile, when I wasn't doing where I'd finished all my work, I'd finished doing whatever work I had to do, I'd hang out in the studios, or I'd ask the mixers, hey, how do you do, show them. We go in the how do you work this thing, this console and machines and, and where do you mic? Constantly asking questions,
Yeah.
And they were very generous and gracious.
Nice.
And so they're teaching me. And, here in the U.S., it's interesting. We don't have formal training for engineering, for the technical side of music. This is how you learn.
Right.
In other places, England, for example, they have more traditional training programs.
Like a college
we don't have that.
Yeah.
So at night, I'm there in the studio, and they would let me go into a studio that was open and take a tape, and I'd like a 16-track tape.
Right.
And just mix, just learn. And so I did that. I basically lived at the studio.
Of course.
And every once in a while, I went back to my apartment and showered. And,
That's how it works.
Which was needed.
So how did you get into the film side of things?
Well, so the progress was I, eventually left, MGM. I had met my partner at the time, a guy named Angel Ballister, who was an engineer at MGM. We left, and we sort of formed this partnership, and we started doing a lot of work independently.
Right.
Some record work, but we started, got a client named Sid and Marty Krofft. And Sid and Marty Krofft did the Donnie and Marie show, which were the Osmonds TV show, and they did Saturday morning cartoons. So we started doing music for those.
Right.
But again, freelance. And in, I'm going to say 1976, I think it was, we started to have this idea, we should build our own studio because we really actually had trouble getting, we had a fair amount of work actually, but we couldn't really get into quality studios. All the really good studios were booked. So we have this, idea, let's build our own studio. We actually did. We pulled it off. We got fine, and we built a studio called Group 4. We had 4 partners, and and we started out doing records and a few, it was mostly records, and we had the idea, why don't we do television and film work here? And we found out what was entailed to do that. Part of it was, of course, getting into the union.
Right.
And we did it. And we were the first really modern recording facility anywhere to do television and film work.
That's cool.
All the film studios at the time had very, very antiquated equipment.
Right.
It couldn't get like a modern drum sound, for example, or modern, whole thing, they couldn't do it because they just didn't have the equipment.
Right.
We had a, modern console, a Trident A series, Studer tape machine, we just had the modern gear. Right. And also the ability technically, and artistically to create that sound. So we got very busy very quickly.
Nice.
So from 78 to 81, we were whaling. I mean, I'd do 2 or 3 episodes of a TV show a day.
Nice.
And then a movie'd come in, and it was just nonstop. It was nonstop.
Huh. Awesome.
So that's sort of how it evolved.
Seems like it's been nonstop since then, till now.
I've been really busy until the strikes, the recent strikes.
Right. Yeah. Of course.
So,
Jeez.
I've been, and honestly, there is a component of luck along the way. Like I said, everybody needs some element of luck, but you also have to have the courage to, when you're lucky enough to have the opportunity slide your way, you have to have the courage to say yes to doing it.
Right.
I know a lot of people who haven't done that.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Awesome. So a lot of what I like to talk about on the podcast is kind of how to get great results from artists in the studio. And obviously the film world is a little bit different because a lot of time the composer is essentially the artist. So how do you kind of get started with a project with a new composer to kind of get their idea of the vision they're going for?
First thing is you have to do a lot of homework. I reach out to the composer, and I thank them for to start off. Thank you for thinking of me.
Right.
I appreciate it. Mm-hmm. And then we'll talk about the project. What do they have in mind? Mm-hmm. This is before I formulate anything.
Right.
They might not even have a studio, so they might ask me,
mm-hmm.
"What studio do you think we should do this project in?" You know, I mean, at this point in my career, people trust my opinion about.
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with facilities in L.A.
Mm.
Pretty actually with facilities around the world now.
Right,
really,
right.
to be honest. But I'll talk with them. Say, well, what do you have in mind? What? Just let's talk about the project.
Right.
What's the film like,
mm-hmm.
or the TV series?
Right.
What's it about?
Mm-hmm.
What do you have in mind musically, or orchestrally?
Mm-hmm.
What, just to get their sense of what they want to do with their music.
Right.
And then we'll talk about, what facility choices. I'll ask for demos.
Okay.
And then I, of course, listen to everything. And then if I have any more questions, I'll talk to them.
Right.
And then we talk about what's the structure of, like, as I say, the orchestra or the musician complement.
Mm-hmm.
They might ask for recommendations for, musicians if it's in L.A. or London. I know most everybody around.
Yeah,
so,
of course.
And then I start to put together the layout of how how I want to record.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And do you do, like on the projects you work on, are you doing everything? Are you doing just the recording, just the mixing, the whole thing? Is there a general consensus?
Well, nowadays, so much of the recording is done outside of L.A.
Right.
Or outside of the U.S.
Right. Just all remote.
Unfortunately, but it's the way it is.
Right.
A lot of reasons for that.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly political and some very, very bad business choices, in my opinion.
Yeah.
On behalf of, kind of the. Anyway,
yeah.
don't need to get into that.
Oh, good.
But anyway, so I'm doing a lot of mixing.
Okay. Nice.
But I do have projects, and the thing of the TV series that I do, those are still recorded in L.A.
Right.
And that has to do with time frame.
Okay.
There just isn't time to do them remotely and have input from, the producers.
Right.
And then mix it and then get it, dub it in the show, et cetera. There just isn't the time frame to do that. So
deadlines are crazy with
they
those.
are. They're very, very much compressed.
Right. Jeez.
So, but I'm grateful. I love recording.
Mm-hmm.
Love mixing. I love all of it.
Right.
But so it still gives me the opportunity to do a lot of recording.
Nice.
So
nice.
Yeah.
I'm sure this may not apply to you so much, but if your clients are struggling kind of with methods and techniques of how to get things accomplished, but you're only hired like as an engineer role and not necessarily the producer or the person that makes the call, how do you kind of walk the line in helping them understand what they need while not stepping on the producer's toes? How does that work in a sense?
Well, if you mean, you're probably thinking more about a record scenario as opposed to.
Yeah, I guess it could apply to like a composer too. Like if a composer doesn't understand, a technique that you would know, how would you kind of help them out in that sense?
The composers I've worked with are very comfortable. Not every single one of them, but for the most part, they're comfortable with who they are, what they know and what they don't know.
Right.
Especially if they're new, recording score
Right.
is especially in a larger facility and all that stuff. It's kind of new to them, so they'll ask questions. Which I appreciate. They'll lean on my experience.
Right.
Well, look, why don't we do this? Or, we have to do this amount of music, or should we split up? Should we have an A and a B band, or,
Right.
these kinds of things?
Right.
And, what's both logistically sound and also respectful of the business side.
Right. Right.
So you don't want to have a large group and then, we're going to spend half a day recording just, a string quartet.
Right.
When we got, 70 people sitting around.
Exactly.
So, you really don't want to do that.
Right. Right.
Because the studios and the people just, they don't want to,
Yeah.
they see, the meter is running.
Yes,
so they don't want to do that. So
maximizing
okay,
it.
well, look, let's do the A, we'll do an A band on this day. These are the cues we can record.
Right. Right.
We'll go to a B band or even a C band at some point.
Yeah.
So it works better for everybody. It works better. It's great for me because I can have a specific setup for each of the bands, the complement,
Right.
and reduce it down or increase it as the case may be.
Right.
And it's also, as I say, respectful of the financial side,
Of course.
which the studios appreciate.
Right. Right.
And it's important, and it's there's never a good idea to be belligerent about the money. I actually had an experience once with a composer who I actually literally saw him end his career in Hollywood because he was disrespectful
Oh, geez.
of the money. Wonderful writer.
Right.
Music was beautiful,
Right. Right.
but he just didn't get it.
Yeah.
And it was like, dude,
Yeah.
this is not going to end well. You should not. You have to respect
Right.
Well,
especially because a lot of scoring dates, all the executives are in the room with you, so it's like you have to respect that.
And
for sure.
and by the way, the studio is not the enemy.
Yeah.
It's really important to never have the attitude that because they're paying for it or because they ask for a deal or what,
Right.
they're not the enemy. It's just business.
Of course.
And you have to respect that. I get it.
Right.
I'm never insulted because somebody says, well, can you help us out on this thing?
Right.
I've found that the people that within the studio system are generally pretty honest. Most people are not looking to screw you out of a few dollars.
Exactly.
They have budgets and they have people to answer to.
Of course.
And, everybody's got to answer to somebody. And they, for this project, they settle on a budget and they want to stick to it. And so,
exactly.
okay, I get it.
Have to make it work.
Yeah. And so it's nothing personal if they say, doesn't mean they think less of you.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah.
Nice. I just want to take a quick break and tell you about my free guide, The Art Method, the Advanced Recording Toolkit. In it, I share the details of how you can get pro studio results from your home studio. I've believed for a long time that it's the cooking, not the kitchen. If you can learn some of the advanced methods for getting great results in the studio, you can do it in any studio. I skip the basics and dive into the more nuanced info you need to level up the quality of your home studio recordings. Check it out now at brendandecora.com/art. And now, back to the show. Can you go into how your techniques have changed over the years?
Oh, well, listen, I started out with tape.
Yeah.
Just the transition from tape to workstations, that alone is a massive change in technique. Sure. But, I still have a pretty substantial microphone collection that I still use. Some are quite old.
Right.
Original Neumann M50s, which are coveted, and they're.
I'm actually curious. Like when I started my career, it was kind of the end of tape. So I use tape quite a bit. I'm very familiar with it, but I never had the chance to do scoring sessions on tape because at that point it was already transitioned. I'm seeing how it's done now with Pro Tools. I can't even imagine how you guys did it with tape, in the day. It's crazy.
Well, it was always challenging, because you always had to consider. Mm-hmm. So you run, I used to run, for orchestra, I'd run a 24 track.
Right.
And usually we're dual 24 tracks.
Right.
At 30 IPS. Mm-hmm. Well, you've got, even with larger reels, you have a very limited amount of time per reel,
exactly.
right? So you're always looking at the tape.
Yeah.
You always have to consider. And then if you have to change tape or tapes in this case,
right,
because you're matching them, well, that's time. So imagine now. Well, sorry, we gotta hold on because we gotta change tapes. It's in the it's between the breaks. So you're actually eating studio time, changing tapes, and then sometimes there's ancillary machinery. What we used to use DA88s or DA98s or whatever.
Yeah.
So you got to change those things.
Change all those.
Document it's.
But
so
would you try to line it up to the breaks as far as when those changes would happen?
You try to.
Of course, yeah.
But it doesn't always work that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So think about it. In some reels, you maybe you have end to end 15 minutes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Of record time.
Right.
Well, if you're really just jamming recording, which happens quite often.
Yeah.
That 15-minute end-to-end thing runs out quickly.
Yeah.
So now, you don't want to go right to the very end. So, I've got, 2 minutes left on the thing. Change reels. So we got, it was all that. And you're always calculating when's the good time to stop and change,
I imagine the sessions kind of sped up in general once, workstations came into play because on a scoring date, like it's nonstop. As soon as they raise their arm, you're in record. Never ends.
There was a couple things that, more than a couple, but things that changed. Mm-hmm. The great thing about the dual multi-track or even single multi-track, however it was, is there were limitations. Mm-hmm. There was track count limitations, and again there was just functionally.
Right.
There's a lot to be said for the limitations.
Yes, that's
because you had to make choices and decisions, and you couldn't get into genius time.
Right.
Now we have workstations which you almost, it's not quite, but almost unlimited track count.
Yeah, definitely.
You don't have the time frame limitation. So, it's just, there's almost too many options.
Right.
By the way, just on a little separate thing, the same problem comes in play with digital film editing.
Right.
So even if they shoot on film, they'll transfer the negative to the workstation, and they never touch it again. Now there's an endless number of editorial options they have. So what that means is you don't have to make a decision.
Yeah.
And it's bad.
Yeah.
And I've worked on projects where the editorial decisions were made hurriedly at the last minute.
Right.
Because what doesn't move is the release date.
That's true. Yeah.
They'll book a release date for a movie, and that's fixed. So everything is pushed against the release date. And so you get to the very end here, and now you've got, if you put all these decisions off to here, now you're making it the worst time.
Right.
Under tremendous
pressure.
stress.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and I've worked on movies that have suffered because of that.
Yeah. No, there's numerous times I've been on the way to the studio and for a scoring date, and you see the billboard for the movie that you're working on.
Yeah,
It's like, uh-oh, I guess we better rush.
Exactly. That's exactly my point.
Yeah.
You know, it's what happens.
Yeah.
And but not, by no means is that every picture. No. Or every project.
Right.
Not at all. But there are some where directors just fiddle with, editorial issues constantly.
Right. Absolutely.
The problem is, and it's interesting, I've had conversations because so movies obviously used to be released on film.
Yeah.
And even on platters, where they'd have the movie would run on platters, on film. Well, now they're released digitally, right? So what that means is, and it was, it dawned on me one day, well, the editorial process doesn't really have to ever end. If you think about it.
Jeez.
Because potentially, I'm not saying it happens, but I'm saying potentially a director could re-edit or continue to edit even after the release date.
Huh.
We'll just send out another set of digital files.
That's crazy.
Isn't that? I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
It's.
I wonder if that's actually happened before.
It would not surprise me if it has.
Yeah. Jeez.
I have no, honestly,
of course,
I have no knowledge of that happening.
Right.
But
for sure,
think about it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure, at least for smaller films, if it goes to a film festival or something, and then after that, okay, let's make a few more tweaks before the big release,
Especially if they're bought. In other words, let's say it goes to whatever, Sundance or Cannes or whatever, and those are really marketplaces.
Of course.
And an entity buys it and says, that's all great, but, this is one section. Is there a way we can read?
Right. Awesome.
If somebody's handing you a bag of money, you're inclined to say, yeah, let's look at that.
Exactly. What do you think is the most underrated skill in the industry today?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. Working with people.
Yeah.
And understanding people.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that, I found there's a lot of fear in the studio.
Yeah.
A lot. There's fear with musicians. There's fear with composers. There's fear in the studios. A lot.
Yeah.
Directors.
Right.
So the first thing I realized is the last thing in the world. I've got a big orchestra. I'm in the studio. The console's gigantic. And you've got people that are scared.
Right.
Is my movie going to do well? Are people going to understand it? Am I going to get killed? Is this the end of my career?
Right.
And and then they walk in and they see this console, which is one of the most intimidating things on earth. It just is.
Yeah.
There's just a million buttons and switches and stuff. And they look at it, and now their fear is ratcheted up exponentially, right? Because they go, "Oh my God, I'm in this place. I don't know what any of this stuff is.
Right.
If this doesn't work, I'm dead."
Yeah.
And then I come in and I make it a point of being very calm, no matter what.
Right.
If something happens, a machine breaks, a module, this problem, calm.
Right.
Because I understand that they're freaked out.
Yeah.
Now, if I freak out, and I'm the guy who's working this stuff that they're scared to death about.
Oh, jeez.
That's a really a key, and I've seen it happen where people get crazed,
right,
and it's just not it's not a good thing.
Yeah,
stuff gets fixed. You can work around something,
right.
If a module in a console breaks, you can work around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You just can.
Right. But if everyone gets all stressed out and freaked out, then that's much harder to fix.
Now the director and these people, their fear level, like I said, it gets ratcheted up exponentially, and it's unfair to them.
Right. For sure.
And you have to have a contingency. You have to have in your mind, what am I going to do if this happens?
Mm-hmm.
What if my Pro Tools system goes down?
Mm-hmm.
Now what?
Right.
I don't want one Pro Tools system. If I got a big project, I'm not going to have one Pro Tools system.
Right.
We're going to have at least one other.
Yeah.
But, but experience has taught me that, you have to be prepared for stuff. Mm. And I always feel if I'm prepared with things, nothing will happen.
Right. Exactly.
But no matter what, you can't go nuts. You got to be calm.
Exactly.
And so understanding the level of fear that people have is really important. Because it's there's a lot of money online. If you're, especially in big movies, they're $300, $400 million project. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. If it tanks, then a lot of people are not going to have careers anymore.
And I get it. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
That studio put their faith in this director, let's say. Mm-hmm. Well, he or she, if this thing goes into the toilet, he or she's got a lot to answer for.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I get it. I understand that. So I try to be supportive, relaxed, calm, that kind of thing. Right. I think that's way underappreciated.
Right. Absolutely. Nice. So speaking of which, as you know, so much of engineering is psychology. How can you assist your clients on a deeper level to connect with them and establish relationships?
Well, we're in a relationship business.
Right.
Honestly. Long ago, a good friend of mine was a mixer, very successful. I said, and this is when I was before I even got the job at MGM.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I was talking to him. I said, man, how do you, your job is, how do you work this thing? And he said, hey, look, that's not my job. He said, you can teach a monkey how to work this. It's not that challenging. It's all the other stuff. It's understanding. And it's interesting you mentioned psychology. I ended up, as I said, I was pre-med and knew that wasn't for me. So I switched my major in college to psychology.
Okay.
And I learned some really interesting things that I thought I'd never need.
Right.
And it turns out I use them only every day.
Exactly.
About human behavior and people and how to treat people and
right.
And so for me, one of the great ways to connect with people is through humor.
Yeah.
To be relaxed, be friendly, understand them.
Right.
Don't. I'd rather do a project with a really, really wonderful person for free,
right,
than a big money making project with a total schmuck.
Right. Exactly.
I'm much at this point in my life. That's just how I feel.
No, absolutely.
Because, quality of life matters. It really does.
Definitely.
It really does.
Definitely. Is there one film scoring project that really pushed you out of your comfort zone, and how did you handle it?
I mean, I've worked on challenging projects, but I don't know. I've always enjoyed the challenging projects,
Right.
because I always learn something from them.
Yeah.
And I have enough. I mean, at this point in my, I have enough confidence in my abilities that I don't think there's anything that's going to be kind of out of my that I can't do.
Right.
I've had difficult projects. I worked on a project, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, with Danny Elfman, and those were really long hours for 5 weeks every day,
Jeez.
and that was that was hard.
Right.
But also it was great in many ways. You
Yeah.
know, I love working with Danny. He's just a consummate, great musician. You know, he's a good guy, smart,
Yeah.
and interesting. And his music's interesting.
Right. Right.
And so, yeah, it's challenging, certainly. But that's part of,
That's
you
part
know,
of the gig.
if we think about it, if you did the same thing day after day after day, you know, it's like, oh God.
It gets old.
It gets old fast.
Yes. Yeah.
So the challenging, the great thing are the variety, the projects that are different, that are unique,
Right.
that push you, that make you think about, oh, how am I going to do that?
Right.
How am I going to set that room up? That's such an odd, musical configuration.
Right.
How am I going to do that? Oh, okay. I get it.
Right.
I'll do,
Right.
I mean, just things like that, aspects that make you try something new,
Right.
try something different.
Right.
That's what makes, for me, what I do interesting, really.
Right. Absolutely. Is there a common myth about film scoring and engineering that you'd like to debunk?
Well, you got good questions. I like that.
Thanks.
Yes. Glamour.
Yeah.
There's not as much as you might think. But
Okay.
what a wonderful way to make a living in the world. I mean, it's just, I've been doing this a long time,
Yeah.
and I think I love it as much right now as I ever did.
Nice.
But there's not a tremendous amount of glamour. How glamorous is it when it's a Saturday night at midnight and you've got to finish a mix that has to be delivered first thing in the morning?
Right.
You're exhausted, but you still got at least another few hours ahead of you.
Oh, geez.
There's a low level of glamour involved in that.
Right.
But like I said, nonetheless, what a great way to be making a living.
Yeah. Awesome.
Being able to be creative,
Right.
meeting interesting people, working with music.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Awesome.
pretty cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Is there any current or recent projects that you can talk about that you'd like to?
Well, I just worked with Danny on his concertos.
Okay.
He wrote 3 concertos, one for percussion,
Oh, nice.
believe it or not,
Wow.
with strings,
Okay.
which was great. So that was a lot of, those are stereo mixes I did of
Okay.
recorded in London, all live.
Nice.
So it was again challenging,
Yeah.
but a lot of fun. And
Nice.
and again, Danny's great. So, and really interesting. Kind of musical choices he made.
Right. Nice. That's cool.
And who would do a percussion concerto?
Yeah.
So that was very cool.
Nice.
And I've got another client I'm doing. Actually, I've been doing a lot of records lately. So
Oh, really?
Yeah, which is
Nice.
kind of nice. We've been still coming out of this strikes.
Yeah.
Currently.
Nice.
So, and the work hasn't exactly ramped up again.
Right. Well, it's because music is always the last step, so it's like
True.
you have to kind of wait until the ball gets rolling with
But
the other side.
what happened is, and I get this, so the first union to go out were the writers.
Mm-hmm.
So they were out for several months, and then the actors went on strike.
Right.
Well, eventually the writers settled, but the actors were still out.
Okay.
So the studios, and again, I understand all of it, and I had no dog in the race,
Right.
only lose.
Yeah. Exactly.
My dog lost. Okay?
Jeez.
But I understood it all. I really do. And studios would not initiate even, well, let's get scripts
Right.
for whatever shows or movies or whatever their projects were. They wouldn't do that until they knew the actors were settled out,
Right.
because they weren't going to, kind of make that investment until
Right.
they knew they could push ahead on their schedule,
Right.
whatever that was. I understand.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So what that meant was a 6-month gap in production
Jeez.
of any kind. So here
Damn.
we are.
Yeah. Oh, good.
So
I like to wrap up each podcast with the same few questions. The first one is, who is your most influential teacher? And it can be a few if you want.
well, I've listened to, as you might imagine, tons and tons of music. One of the most influential people for me, anyway, was a guy named Jack Hunt, who was one of the mixers at MGM, and he befriended me. He was a very difficult personality,
Yeah.
but I mean, an incredible mixer.
Nice.
He just, his sound was, stellar.
Nice.
And I learned a huge amount from him. And, gosh, who else would I say? Probably George Martin
Okay.
on the record side. I think George Martin is the greatest record producer who's ever lived. My personal opinion.
Yeah.
And there's a lot I really, really respect. A lot of young folks today. Jack Antonoff, for example,
Right, right.
Taylor Swift, and a couple other people, who are just sonically, I just love and structurally, musically,
Right.
But that's
Yeah.
I would say, as far as influence goes,
Right. Nice.
That's kind of
Yeah.
where I'm at. But I listen to a lot of contemporary music,
Well,
because
that's
I love to hear the sounds that people are
Right,
creating.
right. Nice. That's actually ties into my next question, which may or may not apply to you, but it's, the question is, what's your favorite reference track if you have to go to a new studio? But I'm finding a lot of my guests don't really use references so much because they work in their own places. They go to the same studios. They don't need to so much anymore. In that case, what would be something you put on to be inspired?
I don't, for me, it's not so much a reference track per se, but I use a lot of references.
Right.
So in my studio here, I have two primary monitor systems. I have a big film chain. It's a Myers sound system. And I also have PMCs over here that I use for as another reference, but also for like if I'm mixing TV or stereo or the references that fit that particular those and then headphones. Odysseys are awesome.
Nice.
I mean, Odysseys. I have LCD3s.
Okay.
I can mix on those and be confident with the product.
Right.
But headphones, are different than monitors.
Of course, yeah.
But I use them. And then I also I have a pair of Bose Bluetooth and also AirPod Maxes.
Yeah. Nice.
For kind of immersive.
Right.
The binaural thing doesn't really work.
No.
but
do you use I find myself using the head rotation thing to kind of be able to hear the back speakers a little bit. It's like
I actually have switched it off, but maybe now you mention it, I think I'll turn it on. Try it out.
Well, it's the only way you can kind of hear it,
I know. To me, if you have to do that, then
exactly. I feel you.
I mean, but I love the technology. I love the new stuff. Atmos is awesome. And I get, most music is consumed on headphones or earbuds.
Yeah.
It just is.
Exactly.
And so, that's kind of if in that delivery realm, the options are, the binaural thing for Atmos or stereo. A good stereo mix is still awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
Definitely.
There's some really, really good ones. And so I just love listening to music. I listen to, on my radio, I have Sirius XM, and I listen to several different stations, and I listen to pop music.
Right.
Because I find that there's so much creativity in it sonically.
Yeah. Yeah.
The reverbs, I listen to a lot of reverb. I use a ton of reverbs in my mixing,
of course.
and, like everybody.
Yeah.
And I want to hear what other folks are doing.
Right. Yeah.
Or no reverb. Right. Which is a whole other thing.
A whole different can of worms.
So I don't know. I love the creativity of all that.
Absolutely.
It's just interesting to me, and I learn. I learn from it.
Nice.
Still learning.
Nice.
So,
of course.
And I love to have that opportunity. So.
Awesome. Last question: what would be one tidbit for an upcoming engineer?
Be nice. Sounds trite. I know.
It's valid though.
But you know what? I think to this day, the reason that I was lucky and I did well when I was starting out, so I was always nice to everybody. Yeah. I went out of my way to be nice. And again, it sounds trivial.
Yeah.
I can't stress how important it is.
Right.
Because of people whose knowledge you seek, if you're nice to them, they'll want to help you.
Right.
They'll want you around.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if the opposite, you know what, get lost.
Exactly.
So it's I think it's one of the most important aspects. If you're starting out, be nice. Be nice to the musicians.
Right.
If they want, if a musician says, can we try a different mic? Yes.
Right.
If you let your ego get in the way,
Yeah.
it ain't going to work out well.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Because the producer or the artist, they need the musician more than they need you.
Yes, absolutely.
It's just the way it is.
Yep.
It's just the way it is.
Exactly.
But I think, that's, and I say that, students, I've talked to a lot of students and stuff. Be nice.
Right. Nice.
So,
cool. Great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate
pleasure,
it.
Brandon. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks for your interest in my few little tidbits.
Of course. Of course. Thanks for joining in today on Pro Audio Profiles. Make sure to hit subscribe, and I'll see you next week.